Ladies and gentlemen, and others, because we don't discriminate against wherever you place yourself across that spectrum, welcome to the Lenko Show, where we talk about all things health and performance. Today, you're going to have to get your little violins out because I am joined by Chris. However, he isn't feeling too well, are you, bro?
It's a serious case of man flu, Alex.
Yeah, self-diagnosed man flu, but in the spirit of pushing through and showing resilience and fortitude in the face of grave or mild illness.
I
So,
was going to go a step further and say grave danger.
right, okay. Well, the important thing is you're here, you're turning up, you're pushing through. In what must be unbearable circumstances, sat on the comfy sofa with your nice hoodie on, chilling out, relaxing.
It's tough conditions, but we
Hard,
move on.
hard, isn't it? Very, very hard. However, so today we are going to bring you our top 10 tips, which we have sequenced in some form of logical order in terms of what will benefit everybody through to what will certainly benefit on a much more specific end, the more athletic population. So we're going to go through them one by one, bit by bit. And yeah, what we would like to know is how these tips have helped you. So if at the end of all of this, you've gone out, you've run yourself a faster 5K, you've hit a PB, we want to hear about it. So please, please, please do let us know. These tips are a surefire way to improve your 5K performance. And if you do want any more specific help on that, we do have specific training programs to help you through and help you improve your 5K time if that is indeed your training goal. So get in touch, let us know about that. You can message us on Facebook, you can email us, get in touch with us, whichever way is best for you, and we will be there to support you through it. Right, without further ado, tip number one, and you're going to find this incredibly hard to believe. It almost is baffling in its simplicity. And I appreciate you may very well turn off the podcast straight after hearing this and think, well, this cannot get any better. But this is a tip which I know for a fact has helped and served many a person actually improve their 5K time. And in terms of its simplicity, it is beautiful. So, tip number one, try to run faster. There we go. I've said it. Just try and run faster.
Unbelievable.
No,
Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. Now, I don't come at this from a point of, being demeaning or you're a bit of an idiot kind of thing. No, purely opposite to that. You are doing an awesome job already. However, from a psychological standpoint, you can always dig a little bit deeper and give a little bit more. So this is about just, you don't even need to necessarily improve your conditioning. You don't necessarily need to go and do a ton more training. You just need to push that little bit harder, that extra 1 or 2%, give a little bit more and improve and increase the speed that you're running at. So if you can do that and you can have that in the forefront of your mind, that I am going to run faster, you will do it. Now, this also comes from a point of view where whenever you run, and whenever you're running for distance especially, your body gets, we naturally like to remain in a comfortable zone. So our body will run at the same pace. If you go out and you time a run with your stopwatch, you might go and manage, like let's say on average it was 6-minute kilometers. So you're running a 5K at 30-minute pace. If you did that with your watch on, go and take your watch off, go and time your run again without looking at your watch, and you will maintain that same sort of pace. I can guarantee you'll be around that 30-minute pace. So what we need to do is kind of clear your mind of that, get rid of all that, get rid of your timing devices, get rid of any little distractions that are going to hold you back to the same pace. Put the emphasis and the focus on being slightly more uncomfortable when you're running. Enjoy it, push that little bit harder, and have a target time in mind. So let's say your target is already 30 minutes, and all that's your average pace that you're running them at, like have 29 or 28, 30 or 28 minutes, have that in the forefront of your mind the whole way through, and use that as a bit of an anchor to pull you and drag you on through. So hopefully that makes sense. So tip number 1, run faster. Chris, any thoughts on that?
No, you know what? I was just thinking, if you can, and this goes for anyone, depending on how, not depending on how fit you are. Like, if you can do a 30-minute 5K, instead of thinking like, right, I'm just going to hit a 25-minute 5K. Like, if you're wondering, like, how does trying to run faster actually help? If you can do a 30-minute 5K, you're probably dead cert to be able to do a 29-minute, 59-second 5K. And if you can do a 29.59, you can probably do a 29.58, and so on and so forth, until you're doing a 1-minute 5K.
A 1-minute 5K?
Yeah, no, I was joking about a 1-minute 5K, obviously. But those little seconds, those little increments, you could, just by pushing that a little bit harder, push the pace a little bit more, definitely could get there. Good tip. Good tip.
So just set a slightly more aggressive target, focus on that, and run at your slightly uncomfortable pace. Slightly uncomfortable. Should hurt a bit.
Yeah, you know what? You could even, just the tippy tip to that, because that's what we're here for. Even when we are, ill, confined to our sofas with our hoodies on, you could even consider, if you know how bad your previous 5K felt, or how okay it felt, presumably, you kind of know how you're going to feel doing it. Does that make sense? You're going to know what it feels like.
So, and remember that you felt that bad, but you survived, which means you can give more. Fact. 100% fact. So you can give more. Remember that you can always give more. Now, do you want to take us through tip number 2?
Yeah, so tip number 2, another one, baffling. Actually, no, this one may confuse people slightly, but it's as simple as increase your running mileage. So run more. The same way, if you wanted to get good at table tennis, I wouldn't tell you to start practicing playing on Pokemon. If you were, that was a weird analogy, wasn't it? If you wanted to get good at running, run more. You want to get better at running, run more. Run more. You want to get faster at running, run faster. It's as simple as that. So I would, if you're looking specifically to increase your 5K time, you could simply increase your mileage over what you would normally run in a week. So let's say you normally do, I don't know, let's say 10 miles a week, to make it simple. Just push that a little bit. So you don't have to do it in 5K increments. But if you're used to doing 10 miles, do 11 miles the following week, do 12 miles the following week, do 13 miles the following week, and just get used to running further distances. Now, specifically, if you were going to try and get better at a 5K, you would probably be looking at running like 7.5Ks and 10Ks, probably a little bit more translatable than doing like marathons and things like that. But that would be tip number 2, run more.
Yeah, run more, improve your running economy, improve your efficiency. It follows a basic principle of training, which is, specific adaptations to imposed demands, where if you practice a specific movement, your body will improve its efficiency and motor unit recruitment for that specific pattern. So if you want to get better at running, run more. And my other little addition to that, another little caveat to that, it would depend on your current level of fitness or your current level of running. But it's the idea of, if it's important, do it every day. Do it every single day. So just a little bit. It doesn't even need to be a lot. Like, you mentioned there about potentially doing a couple of longer runs. If you've done a longer run, let's say it was on a Sunday, maybe on a Monday you get outside and you do a shorter one. Even just 1 kilometer, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but massively reduce your distance, maybe increase your speed. It will help your recovery and you will have still been running. So that's a really simple way to boost your mileage and increase your running frequency and distance across the course of a week. Now, number 3. What did we say number 3 was? There we go. Right. And this is very dependent, again, from your start point. So tip number 3, lose weight, or more specifically, increase your power to weight ratio. So your power to weight ratio is something that we'll touch on a little bit more later on in the podcast with some of the other tips. But number 1, you may need to consider losing some weight. So if you're at, let's say, 20-25% body fat, you're carrying around a lot of excess weight, which isn't going to contribute to your performance. So that is something where, imagine you were running with a weighted vest on, it's going to slow you down massively. For every additional kilo of weight you carry, I think it pushes your VO2 max up by 0.2 milliliters per kilo body weight for every extra kilo that you carry. So it puts more stress, far more stress, on your cardiorespiratory system by carrying that additional weight. So maybe consider a bit of a weight loss training phase, certainly manage your nutrition, and improve your body weight. That is tip number 3.
Yeah, I think with that one as well, it ties in, like, if someone were to, I mean, depending on the start position, like you said at the start, but if you think of the adaptations that your body undergoes when you start training by doing a lot more running and things like that and improving your 5K, just reverse engineer, what would the adaptations be? Like, generally speaking, if you're improving aerobic capacity and things like that, like, you are generally speaking going to be leaner from the training that you are undergoing. So losing weight, I guess, really is an obvious one. If you look at any runners, what is the typical build of a runner? They're not always the same, granted, but if you look at, let's say, 5K runners, let's say 800-meter runners or something like that, like competitive ones, they have a specific build. Even marathon runners have a specific build. 100-meter sprinters have a specific build, the competitive ones, which might not necessarily be you. But what is that specific, I guess, somatotype for the thing you are going to be doing? Get to that position. If you look like one of those and you can perform, well, no, sorry, let me reverse that. If you're performing like one of those, the chances are you're more than likely going to look like one of those.
Very simply as well, think about if you were doing box step-ups in a gym, just as an example of an exercise, or even single leg squats, if you're heavier, you're automatically going to, or the more weight you add, you're going to do less reps. And think about that as every ground contact you have, you're asking the muscles in your feet, your calf, your hamstrings, your quads, your glutes, all through the hips and then through your core, you're asking each of those muscles to apply more force per stride, purely because you're a little bit heavier. So again, that comes down to improving your running economy and your overall efficiency. So if we can improve that, we will certainly see a boost in your performance.
You know what else as well? I'm just thinking, like, if there are any big people who classify themselves as being bigger or more overweight listening to this right now, actually, I would consider this.
Like me?
Yes, just like you. I would actually, you're in a decent position because generally speaking, if you do way more, your legs are more likely to be stronger anyway.
Yep.
So by losing weight and trimming down and reducing body fat, you're actually going to be in a good position to actually be propelling yourself forward and increasing your 5K.
Let's refer to that process as getting wintered.
Getting wintered.
Where you woke up, you had a bit of mass, and then we go through a good spring period and end up in summer where we're absolutely shredded. Moving on swiftly from that, tip number 4, Chris, warm up properly.
Yeah. So, I think this one goes without saying, especially this time of year. Well, it's frosty and icy as well at the moment. I think a big one for this one is obviously you want the blood pumping through the body. You want the muscles to be nice and warm so you're not sustaining any injuries and so that you can actually push harder. I don't think for tip number 1, if you're trying to push the pace, I couldn't think of anything much worse than if you're actually in some kind of actual physical pain while you're trying to do that, like joints or tendons or ligaments or something like that. I think another good one to add to this one as well is making sure that your heart rate obviously you wouldn't necessarily have a specific way to measure this, but getting your heart rate up to the point of somewhere nearby where it's going to be when you're actually doing your 5K. So obviously you do some dynamic stretches, loosen everything off that you need to loosen off, get the muscles firing that you're going to have firing, simulate a run, do some form of jogging and some form of running at said pace over obviously a short distance. You don't want to knacker yourself out. Make sure you are nice and warm and ready to go, and then go for it, mate.
Yeah, I think especially at this time of year when it's colder, and even at the best of times, most runners, and I would certainly put myself in this category as well, of whenever you do go for a run, your warm up simply consists of putting your shoes on, going out the front door, locking your front door, setting up your Strava or whatever tracking app you use, or your Garmin watch, and then off you go. And that's what constitutes the warm up. However, certainly this time of year and pretty much any other time as well, it is not a good way to go about it, and it will lead you down a path of potentially getting injured, which we definitely don't want. And this time of year in particular, because of the temperature difference, your actual readiness to perform is, what I would argue, at a slightly lower set point than if the temperature was a little bit warmer. So, one of the purposes of the warm-up is to do exactly that, to warm up the muscles, warm up the blood, increase your body temperature, speed up your heart rate before you actually set yourself off. So that's generally a little bit lower. We're always a little bit colder at this time of year, and it's important to spend maybe a little bit more time preparing yourself for that. Now, to help you do this, I do actually have, some of the one of the key muscle groups to being able to perform and run well is generally around the hips. So glute activation. Glute activation is vital, and having the hip mobility to be able to, so that you're not resisting that glute contraction, is key to you being able to perform. So I will put a link to that in the show notes for this, so you can click and watch that. That's on our YouTube channel as well. So you can get that little warm-up routine. It's about a 10-minute routine. You just need some resistance bands, but you can do it body weight, and do that before you actually get outside. Now, once you are outside and you are in the fresh air, it might be worth just walking for a few minutes to begin with before you actually pick up the pace, maybe go into an easy run for a couple of minutes. Irrelevant of your level of fitness, get running a little bit. And then something I always suggest, I don't know if you do the same with this, Chris, but I would suggest doing what I refer to as gassers, where you push the pace maybe to 75, 80%, maybe even slightly above your running pace for a brief period of time, so you're actually getting that speed up. And then, you're ready to perform as soon as you set off, rather than spending the first 5 to 10 minutes of your 5K run actually going through that process and warming up.
Yeah, I think it's simple. Like, I think people overcomplicate it or just totally neglect it when we say the term warm-up. But if you think you're actually trying to run a fast 5K, the idea really is all you're trying to do is prepare your body and your mind for exactly what it is about to do. The same way, if I said to you, okay, you're now going to do a 20-minute presentation on how to trim your big toenail.
What is up with your analogies today?
I don't know. But most people, not all, most people would probably do some form of preparation for that. It's the same thing, especially if you're tying this in with tip number 1, which is trying to run faster. You need to be ready for where you need to be running at. So I would completely agree with your last point, which is like, do your gases, push yourself to 90% pace, see how that feels, know how you feel on the day. That's where you're going to be running at.
Yep. Then tip number 5, we have got, and this is kind of a 2-in-1, find a pacer and start fast. So if you haven't got a pacer, start fast. Now, when it comes to finding a pacer, if you're at a timed event or a park run event and there are pacers there, be a little bit ambitious. Aim for a PB, try and tag on. Even if you feel yourself, like let's say your PB is 30 minutes and you're following someone who's aiming for a 27-minute time, try and tag on to that group of 27 minutes, even though they're 3 minutes ahead of your PB. Try and stick to the back of that pack and hang with them for as long as you can, because that will drag you through. All right, 3 minutes is, I'd say at that point, that's probably fairly achievable. Obviously, the faster you get, if you're looking at 20 minutes and sub 20, you might have to follow a pacer a little bit closer to that PB, but that's going to be towards the limit anyway. So that 30-minute time, 27 is probably a good window to aim for. Now, if you haven't got a race pacer, maybe you've got a friend who's slightly quicker, hang with them, get them to pace it and pull you through it and run with it. So the simple thing about that is that you don't actually have to think about how fast you're running. All you need to do is think about sticking with them and concentrate on your breathing and your rhythm. And if you can do that, it takes a load off your mind. Now, the least unfortunate of those ones, if you haven't got access to any of those, you need to know your previous PB, and then you need to break it down into 1 kilometer intervals where you're running each one quicker than your normal pace would require. So let's say your normal pace is 30 minutes. We'll probably use that as a standard example for all of these anyway. I think it's fairly common. Now, if your normal pace is about 30 minutes, you're running at 6-minute kilometers. Hopefully my math is right on that, top of my head. I'm sure it is.
Well, you've used that time twice now, so let's hope it is.
Yeah, risky. So if your normal pace is 6 minutes per kilometer, just try and drag that down to be somewhere and aim for a region of 5:30 to 5:45 per kilometer. If you can do that, you'll hit a PB no problem. Now, final tip. My final tip on this one of tip number 5, the final part of it, is to start fast. So go off at a quick pace. And then what you're going to do after your first kilometer or so is you get into your rhythm and you get into your running. Maybe you feel like you're blowing a little bit. You're going to pull back slightly. So we talked earlier on about running faster, trying to run faster, and running at what is an uncomfortable pace. You're going to do that from the very beginning. Then you're going to fall back to your normal average running pace. All right, so you're going to get ahead of the race pace. Then you're going to stay at your same consistent running pace. And that's going to help you recover a little bit. And you're going to use that to hang on. And then for your final kilometer, which is probably going to be somewhere, if for the example we're talking about, somewhere between 5 and 6 minutes, that's all there is left. It's 1 kilometer, or it's 5 minutes to 6 minutes worth of just absolutely gassing it, and you can hang on for that. So start fast and maintain a pace, settle into your running, keep it consistent. And then when you can kind of, figuratively speaking, see the finish line, put a pedal to the metal and give it everything. Give it everything you can. So that's my tip on that. And incidentally, every track world record from 800 meters through to, I think, the 5K, maybe even the 10K, always follows what we traditionally refer to as a bit of a U shape. So from tracking the lap times, the fastest lap time has always been either the first lap or the final lap. So the first lap and the final lap are generally the quickest. The ones in between are a little bit slower, but they're at a continuous, consistent pace, which is kind of like that threshold and that part where you can just about hang on. So start fast, finish as fast as you can.
Push the pace. Push the pace.
Do you want to take us through tips? So that's 5 so far.
Yeah.
Do you want to recap on those 5? so far. Should we go through them? So,
Yeah, go for it.
number one, try to run faster. Number two, run more, get more miles in your legs through the week, increase your running frequency. Tip number three, lose weight or increase your power to weight ratio if you're already a little bit of a lighter weight. Tip number four, follow a warm-up protocol, warm up properly, especially when it's cold outside. Tip number five, find a pacer / start fast.
I think it's worth noting that none of these are particularly mind-blowing tips either. I think these are your basics, really. Like very, very simple things that you can all start implementing as of right this second.
Yeah.
So tip number six, we have race. So get used to competing. So if you, well, it doesn't really matter if you did your 5K alone or not. I think we all know that you will have a more than like, well, no, you generally speaking will have a greater capacity when you are performing in front of a crowd, or when you are competing. You will have a competition maximum, let's say. I think that's what it's referred to in strength and power and stuff like that. But it's the same thing. You'll have, a bit of adrenaline spiking, maybe some serotonin, maybe it might be a couple of nice dogs at the park.
Definitely a bit more cortisol in the system.
Absolutely. Just give you a bit of what you need to push that a little bit harder. And also, it ties in with the other tips as well. So if you're looking at finding a pacer and things like that, you can literally pick the people who are running faster than you and chase them down, hunt them down. Very, very simple. So compete. I don't think there's anything else to add to that one, really. What, have you got anything to add to that one?
Well, not particularly. Rely on your physiology, use that to help you through it. And, we're not talking about going out and maybe announcing to your entire town to line the streets and ring the cowbells as you come blasting home through the final straight towards your front door. We're not we're not necessarily suggesting you do that kind of thing, but it just simply needs to be, if it is an event or a park run or a structured event where you're around other people, there's always, I don't think it matters really who you are at a park run. There's always someone who either is slightly ahead of you or you're slightly ahead of them. And it's always that unsaid, like, I'm going to race you, I'm going to beat you kind of thing. And there's always someone that pips someone else to the finish line. So, apply a little bit of competitive spirit, use it to pull you a little bit faster, and trust it to get you through. So that is tip number 6, race / compete, do it in an event. Now, number 7, I know you like this one, Chris. You're a big fan of this. This is probably your tip number 1, wouldn't it?
Yes, I would say so, yeah.
So like all of this is very open to interpretation, and you can apply it in any way you want. But number 7 is adapt your training. So we've kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of run more, increase your distance, increase your frequency. What we mean in adapting your training is your type of training. So break your 5K down into intervals. You might want to work on various qualities of fitness, whether it's your overall aerobic capacity and improving your VO2 max and your CV fitness. It might be a case of increasing your lactate threshold, so the point at which you start to accumulate lactate, which ultimately starts to slow us down eventually. We can train that and we can improve and delay the onset at which that occurs. We can actually increase overall speed. So by doing actual sprint training, if you can increase your top end speed, let's say your top end speed is, well, let's say it was 20 kilometers an hour, and your running speed is 10 kilometers an hour, that's 50%. Whereas if your top end speed is 25 and your running speed is 10, you're running at a pace that's less than 50% of your capability, which means it's far less effort. Fairly logical, isn't it? So by increasing your top end running speed, the overall speed at which you would probably maintain becomes a little bit easier. So your average running pace can increase from that standpoint. So a couple of little points on that. we spoke earlier about maybe incorporate some longer runs and then increasing maybe some of the intervals that you're doing. So break it down into 1 kilometers, break it down into 800 meters, break it down into 400s if you want. As long as you're following a specific plan in that sense, or you're actually trying to run faster, that's the whole point of breaking it down into intervals. You try to run faster, you will improve your performance.
Yeah, I think the main thing there is like breaking it down and then building it back up again. Like if you said you were doing a 30-minute 5K, which is the time that we've gone with previously, and then you broke that down into 1 kilometer intervals at a faster pace, you're essentially training your body to get used to running at that faster pace, which is, if you practice running at that faster pace, you will get good at running at that faster pace. So you'd start off by breaking the distance down and then running faster, and then slowly build that distance back up to 5K. Simple as that. Simple, not easy.
And incorporate hill sprints.
Yes.
Don't neglect those. Very, very good for overall strength work, improving strength of your hip flexors and being able to apply power into the ground. So don't neglect your hill sprints either, even though they are probably one of the most horrendous things you can do. Do your hill sprints.
Hey, if you can run uphill, you can run on a flat.
Yeah, turn your mountains into molehills. I like that one. I'm having that. Turn your mountains into molehills.
That was very cute. I like it. So that is change up your training. So tip number 8, Alex, what have you got?
Tip number 8, we have got get stronger and improve lower body strength and core strength specifically.
Fantastic. There you go. Anything to add to that one?
So I think relating back to, where was it? Which tip? Tip number 3, which was to increase your power to weight ratio. The stronger you are, the more robust you are. That will mean you are more resilient and less prone to injury further down the line. So thinking about improving the quality of muscle tissue in your calves, quads, like even through to your feet, stability through the hip and knee, and your lower back as well. I know there are plenty of first-time runners or beginner runners who develop a lot of low back pain or knee pain. Like it even has its own specific injury name, runner's knee. So by doing the correct strength and mobility work, you can actually, not just reduce it, but pretty much eliminate it and improve your performance at the very same time through doing some very, very basic exercises. It doesn't need to be overly complex. It doesn't need to be overly difficult. But, we can get very clever when it comes to training. We can make training incredibly complex and, incredibly awkward for people who, don't really know what they're doing. But by doing the right movements, increasing the weight with which we do them, and then increasing the speed at which you perform the movements, making them more specific to running, you will get big benefits from doing that.
Yeah, and I think with running as well, you definitely don't need to overcomplicate it. Like you've said, running's a bodyweight movement, so you only really need to do bodyweight stuff. You can implement resistance work, which will obviously make you stronger, because then as soon as you get relieved yourself of that weight, it's like we said, tip number 3, lose weight. You will be stronger for the capacity and for the demands that you're actually imposing on yourself. I think it's also worth noting, like, try not to do running with weights. I don't know where you stand on that, Alex, but I think you can walk with weights, I suppose, but running with weights, try not to do your strength work elsewhere. Don't run with the weights.
Yeah, can cause a little bit too much loading and too much trauma, especially if you're already quite heavy. Bit too much stress on the joints. I have done running in a weighted vest before, but that was a bit stupid.
You can do it in a competitive environment, but I mean, it's like I remember talking to one of my clients was in the military, and I remember talking to him about it, and it was like, mate, even when you're trying to join the military, you're not expected to run with weights. You're expected to walk with weights, tab with weights, like do your weighted walks and stuff fast, but don't be running with weights before you get in, because you just destroy yourself, hips, knees, and ankles everywhere.
That's one of the things where you have to very gradually over time build it up and increase your tolerance and your resistance to it. Think about it as almost just callousing your hands, and like you all get calluses from picking up weights and stuff like that. The more you can do that, the more you can solidify and build yourself up to become resilient and robust against that kind of stress. So make you focus on getting stronger. And getting stronger, I will add this as well, especially for a lot of runners out there that are afraid of lifting weights or don't want to lift weights in case they get bulky or they lose their type 1 fiber endurance capabilities. That's simply not the case. Getting stronger is more about multi-unit recruitment, and it's not about building muscle. It is not about building muscle. It's about being able to apply more force and recruit more muscle fibers, especially you've already got them, so let's recruit them and use them, put them to work. Does that summarize tip number 8? Happy with that, Chris?
I think we've just about touched on it there. Yeah.
All right, moving on. We're on to our last 2 now, so we are getting a little bit more advanced, but again, I don't think we've applied anything or said anything here that's going to scare people off or scare you off. So hopefully you see some form in which all of these are applicable. Tip number 9, nutrition. Chris.
I was going to interrupt you there and say tip number 1 might scare a few people.
Oh.
Try to run faster.
I mean, if you're actually scared of running faster and you're listening to a podcast on how to run a faster 5K, you're in trouble. I think you've completely led yourself down the wrong path there, if that's the case. So if you are listening to this and you are worried about running faster, you're fucked.
What I would say is have 500 grams of creatine just before you run. No, you wouldn't do that. Yes,
Chris, come on. Be sensible now. Be sensible.
Where would you go for nutrition then?
Tip number 9, nutrition. So I would eat, plenty of time before actually running. So you're not running on a full stomach, and don't have a full meal. Don't go and have your full English breakfast or a Sunday roast or something before you go and run a 5K. I mean, that's just adding, well, in some people's cases, a couple of kilos worth of food. You don't want to do that. You're weighing yourself down. It's going to be hard to digest. You want something that's easy and full of energy. So I would say minimum 2 hours before you run, get some food, go and, just porridge oats and honey or golden syrup or maple syrup or something like that, sweeten it up, loads of carbohydrates in that, add some fruit and berries, maybe a couple of nuts in there. Perfect for your energy and easy to digest. And if you've given it a couple of hours before you run, you will be rocking and rolling, ready to go. A couple of another little tip for you on endurance in particular, caffeine. Go and bang an espresso down or get a double espresso, bang some of that down you, because that will increase alertness, it'll increase your heart rate. And that is actually quite a very, very good natural performance enhancer when it comes to endurance events. And again, I would throw that in there with team sports as well, football, rugby. Probably not cricket, because there's a lot of standing around there. You don't want to be having too many Red Bulls or coffees for a game of cricket. Lord knows what could only happen on the boundary fence.
You know what? That would make cricket a lot more interesting.
I really want to hear Bumble on the commentary and go, Jimmy Anderson is absolutely wired down there. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So, but yeah, team sports, endurance events, go and get some caffeine in. 30 minutes or so before you start.
Yeah, I think with this one as well, one thing that I say to the clients that I train that are runners is don't do anything like stupid. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't have something that you think is going to sit on your stomach. Don't have something that you don't like. Don't have something that you wouldn't normally have that's just going to complicate things and potentially make it worse for you. If you're trying to push a PB, you don't want to be like, well, you might feel a little bit shit while you're doing it, but you don't want to have something that's making your stomach go or anything like that. You absolutely do not want. To be fair, in an extreme scenario, if you're having some stomach and bowel issues, you might run a little bit faster, depending on who you are, all right, and where you're trying to get to. Well, but don't overcomplicate it.
I would certainly advocate for lightening the load pre-run as well.
Go to the toilet before. Also, and with that, make sure you're hydrated beforehand as well.
Yeah.
You don't want to be running dehydrated at all.
Hydrating is a big one. Again, principles of just good health, not even sports performance, but just good health. Make water your main drink. Make that your main drink every day. Get some of that down your neck, and don't get dehydrated. Yeah, very good. Nice little bonus there.
And I think it's worthwhile adding to that as well, just while we're talking about like what you're doing just beforehand. Probably should have tied this in with a warm-up. Ideally, don't have done something ridiculously strenuous just beforehand.
Yeah. I think we could probably do a whole different podcast, and we will have to do another podcast at some point on priming the nervous system and, pre-event, pre-game, pre-match, the day before, what do you do? Because there are some specific things that I would recommend, and I do recommend, to put yourself in the best position possible to perform the next day. So stay tuned for that. Keep an eye out, an eye and an ear open for that. We will be releasing that at some point once we've recorded it. Just something else to talk about. Anyway, we're nearly there now, so we're on to the last one.
The last one is practicing breath holds. Now, I mean, I don't know if people are watching this, but I broke my nose. I struggle nasal breathing, which is a good help for when you're running, nasal breathing. So what have you got for this one then, Alex? Practice breath holds. Expand for us.
Right, so there are a couple of different ways, and this is something else that's applicable to everyone, but the general premise of it is that by practicing breath holds, you can actually initiate a splenic contraction, which will, you're almost essentially trying to simulate hypoxia or training at altitude, and reducing your saturation levels. So you actually encourage the production of more red blood cells. That's the up and down of it. So you're essentially trying to legally replicate the effect of blood doping. And it is possible, not to the same extent of blood doping, but you can actually increase red blood cell count, hemoglobin, through practicing breath holds and generating what is a splenic contraction to get that into the system. So more red blood cells, more hemoglobin, you can carry more oxygen, make your CV system much more efficient, and improve your performance. So maintaining your normal running pace is far less effortless, or far more effortless, rather. That's right, isn't it? More effortless. Yes. Sorry, I can see you were confused there. So, a really simple drill for this that you can practice every day, and it's something that I do, which kind of taken from it's a combination of a couple of really good things and bits of information out there. Patrick McEwen from The Oxygen Advantage, who wrote The Oxygen Advantage. Wim Hof, again, is another one who is very, very big on breath control, breathing, for whether it's health, performance. And this is the kind of thing that, even looking into what free divers do and some of the techniques that they apply, we don't want to go to those depths because they are essentially professional breathers. They're almost whale-like in what they can do. But it is perfectly possible through very good practice and consistent repetition to be able to hold your breath for 2, 3, 4 minutes plus. Even the first few times that I tried this, my breath holds were a minute and a half to 2 minutes on the first few times. I was a little bit like, how has that happened? But it is perfectly possible. Um, so we do have a specific course and a specific practice that you can do, and a specific training program that you can do for this and to improve your breathing and help calm your mind, focus the mind, energize yourself. We do have some specific practices and training programs for that. The next one that I would recommend is that you can practice breath holding whilst actually running. So this is something to do once your BOLT score, that we refer to as your body oxygen level test, once your BOLT score improves to sort of 30 seconds and beyond, whilst you're running and you're practicing your nasal breathing, you're going to go through a spell where you actually hold your, like, fully exhale, hold your breath, pinch your nose, keep running, build up that lack of oxygen, increase the amount of CO2 in your blood, and experience what it's like to be very, very low on oxygen. So there are a couple of techniques that you can apply, whether it's first thing in the morning when you do like 34 breaths in and out, and then on the last one you exhale, pinch your nose, hold your breath, or whilst you're running if you're already somewhat adept at it. But on the most basic level, by simply being aware and conscious of your breathing whilst you're running, relaxing, slowing it down, breathing in and out through your nose, timing your breathing with your running cadence and your running rhythm, you should see a pretty good improvement in performance just through doing that.
Yeah, I think so. It's a long time ago since I read The Oxygen Advantage, but I remember reading about the study they did. I think it was specifically with rugby players where they were doing sprints. I don't know if you recall it, but so obviously the key part of what you said there is exhale first, then hold your breath through the sprint. And I remember obviously the idea was that eventually it was improving your VO2 max. And in relation to running, especially if you're running fairly hard, trying to push a PB, if you are more comfortable working at a harder intensity, it's going to be easier.
Yep.
Like, there's no other way around that. It's going to be easier.
Yeah.
Not easy, but easier.
Yeah. And this is something that I've practiced it in the gym, in a studio, on a bike, on a treadmill, just walking backwards and forwards, where with a pulse oximeter on, so I can see my oxygen saturation levels. And I've been practicing actually trying to drop those sats as low as I can. So normally most people at sea level, our saturation levels will be somewhere so like 97, 98, 99 percent. And if you're below 90, typically that's kind of deep trouble. We're going to put you in hospital for that kind of thing. But yeah, essentially all it is just walking backwards and forwards. You breathe in and out a few times, fully exhaling. And then the next time you do it, you breathe in, breathe all the way out, let all the carbon dioxide out as much as you can. You pinch and seal your nose, and you keep on walking, and you build up a hunger for air. And depending on how comfortable you are with this, depending on how hard you practice and how often you do it, you can progress from sort of like a light to moderate hunger for air before you actually let go and breathe in, to quite a strong and intense desire and need to breathe, where your diaphragm is pretty much kicking up at you and kicking you in the chest to like breathe in. But the longer you can hold it, the more you'll see that oxygen saturation levels start to drop. And even to the point where I was holding it, and then as soon as I felt like a relatively moderate need to breathe, actually pick up the pace and start jogging, start running a bit, so you kind of consume even more oxygen, saturation levels drop even further, and then you breathe in, and it's like someone's just poured a bucket of freezing cold water over your head, wakes you up, energizes you. And again, I said improving your ability to breathe, increasing your red blood cell count. That's something you can actually practice and simulate every day if you choose.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, imagine it as you're teaching your body to work more efficiently with what is already in it, and then while you're running, you're putting more in it anyway.
Yeah. It's like putting a bigger fuel tank in your car.
Yeah,
You're going to be able to go further.
it's like driving your Mini Cooper, and then for the race you put a supercharger on it. No, it's not quite the same as that. It's not quite the same. But
the other thing as well, I mean, eventually one day when we're allowed to go back to swimming pools or we're allowed to go on holiday, it's a pretty sick way to freak people out. You can be lying there on a sunbed. Well, this would be the first part that's freaking them out, but you can be lying there on the sunbed, practicing your breathing drills, doing your inhales and exhales. People around you be thinking, what the fuck is this guy doing?
You're right, that really would freak people out.
Yeah. So that's part one of freaking them out. Step two of freaking them out is going into the swimming pool, sinking all the way to the bottom and just sitting there for about 5 minutes before popping up. See how long it is before people start panicking or dragging you out, like whether they notice that you've been down there for that amount of time. Or you could do it where you just choose to float face down.
I knew you were going to say that.
And that's another good option. There's another really good way to really freak people out. If you've got the waiter or the bartender fishing you out of the pool, and you never know if there's a rather lovely lifeguard there. You could have your life saved every single day of your holiday if you so choose to do that. And we're not talking about like the Joey on Friends classic kind of sitting there just pretending to not breathe without, like, you actually have to pinch and seal your nose and completely shut off that barrier of
you know what, I know this isn't the point of what we're talking about here, but I was just thinking of different scenarios where you could use that. So you could actually implement that. So it's, say you're coming off like the end of a family raft, so you've just gone into the final plunge and everyone's in the raft. You come out the raft, you've done your breathing, just sort of hover there at the end. Class.
Do you know, I want to get some more opinions on this. Please let us know in what situation you would choose to breath hold. So what would be a great situation? What would be the advantages of you? Would you float upside down or float face down in a swimming pool on holiday to be saved by a lovely lifeguard? Where would you use it? Write to me at alex@lenkohq.com. Let me know where you'd use it, and if we get some fun responses, we might read them out. If not, we'll probably keep them, use them for ourselves, and go from there.
I don't suppose anyone's written in talking about the good conversations you've had about the news recently.
No, funnily enough, nothing.
No.
Funnily enough, nothing. No.
So
anyway, I believe that on that final one of practicing breath holding, that actually concludes our top 10. So, Chris, would you like to rattle through them and round them off for us?
So, tippy tip. No, oh, hang on. I've just closed them. Give me a second. So, number one. Would you believe it? This is a breakthrough tip. Try to run faster. Tip number one. To run a faster 5K, push yourself and try and run a little bit faster. Tip number two, increase your running economy, increase your running mileage, run more. That's it. Run further, get used to running, get your body, your joints, your tendons, your ligaments, your cardiorespiratory system to get used to running. Tip number three, shed the timber. Get rid of excess weight. That will help. Tip number four, warm up, prepare the mind and the body before you actually do the 5K.
So it's amazing the performance increases you can see even in training sessions just by doing a proper warm up.
Do you imagine? Obviously, we said about. So the next tip number 5, which is finding a pacer and starting fast. Could you imagine trying to start fast if you've literally just stepped outside your door, locked it, and set off. If you're an experienced runner and a 5K is like your thing, then okay, fair enough. You may get away with being okay and not having any problems or anything like that and still running fairly decent. If you're not, you have no business trying to do that. No, it's just rude. Don't do that to yourself or anyone else.
Do you know, this is it. Like we always talk about, you learn from the elite, learn from the best, take their lessons, take their principles and apply them to your own practices. You know, every time you see a high performing team or athletes warming up or, you know, practicing drills, running through things, mobilizing before a game, you know, it's because that stuff works. And then, you know, we decide that we don't need to do that, or we don't want the benefits of doing that, or we haven't got the time to do that. I'm sorry, but you know, if you have to choose between one or the other, warming up and doing half a training session or doing a full training session without a warm up, 100% pick option one. Do the warm up and then half the session. You'll get more from that half a session than you would from doing a full session with no warm up, because the first half of your session anyway, without a warm up, is going to be shit. So do a warm up. We're not too good. We're not too good to warm up. We're not too good. Go and do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It might seem useless, but in actual fact, if you're doing a warm up before your training session, you'll train a lot better. And I don't mean you'll just feel better during your training. Your performance will actually improve, like quite a significant amount. So then when you actually do come to actually participate in the PB or what you're hoping for to be a PB, of course that'll be much better. Of course it will. And you know what? I was just, so this isn't in the list. I've just thought we could have even added, but we're not going to, because it is a silly thing. It's typical of me to say something like this. I was going to say, have a wild animal chase you. I was just thinking on the lines of warming up, the only time it would be acceptable, really, and potentially possible to run a 5K PB is if you were being hunted by something that was going to eat you or something similar. Then you would probably haul ass.
Yeah.
But even then, physiologically, you're probably in a decent place because, like we said earlier, your cortisol and adrenaline's probably spiked. You are effectively warm when you're running away from that thing. Not to say that you probably will feel horrendous coming out the end of it, but certainly during, you probably haul ass there. So that was, funnily enough, that was do a proper warm up. And then number 5 was find a pacer and starting fast. So I guess that kind of ties in with number 1. It's like you're trying to push the pace. If you know you can run a 30-minute 5K, run with someone who's doing a 29 or a 28 or a 27-minute 5K. Number 6 was race and compete. I guess it's kind of the same sort of stimulus. Well, it's not quite the same, but similar stimulus. It's being chased, competing in a competitive environment, especially in an environment like that. And also with that, you're making the whole 5K something bigger for yourself and for the other people around you. Like the bigger you can make it and the more immersed in the event you can be, the better you will do. The better you will do. Yeah, and there's also there's like an element of like risk reward there as well if you're competing with other people, which you're always going to do better in that situation as well. So that's number 6. Number 7 is change up your training / optimize your training to running a 5K PB. I don't think we need to add too much to that. We've mentioned about do specific speed sessions where you are, find out what your pace is, what speed you run at, and run faster. Break the 5K down, run at a faster pace, run further at the same pace or faster if you can. You've already hit a 5K PB if you manage to do that, but practice running at a similar pace for longer durations or increase the run economy, etc., by running further and your aerobic capacity, etc. And running hills. We mentioned running hills as well. Don't neglect them. Number 8 was get stronger, which is similar to kind of like warming up and stuff. You're basically priming your body to be in the best position to run a 5K well. If you strengthen not just the muscles, but the bones, the joints, the tendons, the ligaments, everything around the hips and below, your legs are going, those things will carry you better. I think that's fairly simple. I don't think I need to explain that further. Number 9, nutrition. Make sure you're not bloated or really need a poo or
just overly full.
Yeah, overly full. Make sure you're hydrated. Make sure nothing's sitting heavy on your stomach. And then number 10, optimize your breathing. Practice your breath holds. And I think that's probably the most technical, the most niche one that we've got in there.
Yeah.
But certainly not one to overlook, especially if you have read or looked at the oxygen advantage or anything like that. These are things that you can be doing. And really, whilst they might not seem that interesting to you right now, things that you probably should be doing if you're interested in health and performance remotely. These are things that will improve your everyday life in every area. Full stop. So that's your 10.
Wonderful stuff. So, ladies and gents, take your 10. Oh yeah, ladies, gents, and others, take your 10.
We don't discriminate.
No. Good luck to the polar bears and penguins doing this. Wish you all the best. Take your 10 tips. Maybe just apply a couple to begin with. See how you get on. Start off by obviously knowing or timing a 5K from now. Don't take your PB from 10 years ago, because that's a very different situation to where you are right now. So take where you are right now, time your run, apply our tips, and see how you get on. If you would like some additional help with your 5K performance, or even anything else, we can help you with that. Simply get in touch with us. Alex at lenkohq.com, Chris at lenkohq.com, or messages on Facebook through Lenko HQ, or is it Lenko Performance and Coaching? Isn't it? It's Lenko Performance and Coaching on Facebook. I'm terrible with our social media. Send us a message on there. Find us on Instagram, Lenko HQ on there, and we will get in touch. We will speak to you. We will be able to help you improve your performance, just improve your general health.
Yeah, I think one last thing that we can mention as well is if you haven't run a 5K before, or your last PB was 10 years ago, and you're not sure if you'd even make it that far, you literally go and do it. Run as much of it as you can. If you have to walk parts, just make a note. Managed 7 minutes, had to walk for the rest. Next time you're trying to run for 7.5 minutes or 8 minutes, or trying to run for 10 minutes, and then you can walk the rest.
Perfect. That's it. Anyway, that concludes episode number 19. 19 episodes in. So hopefully you've enjoyed them so far. Please, please, please leave us a review. Feel free to share this with anybody and everybody. If you're running a 5K, or you know someone who is or wants to improve their 5K time, then share this show with them. Let them reap the rewards. Don't be a greedy son of a gun and keep it all to yourself. Until next time, that's it from me. I'm from Chris.
Lenko out. Live long and prosper.